Good morning, world studies, or afternoon. I always say that, and then I remember, hey, maybe it's not morning for you. But we're starting World War II. Hopefully, you read that yesterday, and so you understand a lot of that first section. Just want to mention a couple of things. One thing you're going to see in World War II, unlike World War One, there were so many entangling alliances in World War One. It's like, hey, let's go, yeah, let's fight. World War II is almost right the opposite. Um, People didn't want to fight. Countries didn't want to get brought into this because they had been through World War One. They're like, hey, that was terrible. It was heinous. Let's don't do it again. But you see all of this aggression. You see Italy, Germany, and Japan, all of them just going for it and just taking over country after country. And finally, countries get pulled in. One of the things that your book mentions, the Japanese, they would take over little islands, they would fortify them. And that was one of the hardest things in World War II. When we started fighting in the Pacific, when we, being the United States, started fighting in the Pacific, it was very difficult because you go into these islands, they've had several years to fortify them, to set up mines and to set up barricades and to set up fencing and to set up booby traps and to set up soldiers barricaded in different places where they could fire at you. It made it so difficult. One thing that Japan did in 1937, they captured Nanking, the Republic of China's capital. And it said that, and estimates vary, it could have been 200,000. Oh, I touched my face. I'm going down. Could have been 200,000, could have been 300,000, but either way, the Japanese troops, when they took over Nanking, they killed either 200 or 300,000 Chinese people. I mean, just boom. And it was brutal stuff. They tortured and assaulted a lot of women, let's put it that way. It was a horrible thing. In fact, it was so brutal to the point that there are nations, even today, that still have a bitter taste for Japan. It's kind of like, I'll be honest, when I go to a Japanese restaurant, first thing I think when I walk in is Pearl Harbor. I mean, it's that same concept. You were terrible to us. And so it had long-term effects. Hitler, your book talks about the Third Reich. And Hitler, here's the thing about Hitler that you need to understand. It's not like Hitler was operating off the cuff. Hitler had all of this planned out. I mentioned that Hitler was part of World War One. He did not want Germany to stop. And he wanted Germany to be this great mass nation, this world power. And Hitler had been planning this for years, and people acted like it was a shock. You know, he sets up this Third Reich, and he sets up all of these plans. But he had written about it in a book called My Struggle, or Mein Kampf. He had written all that he wanted to do, or a lot of it. He had written about the Third Reich, and there were films of Hitler's speeches that people could see if you just translate them into English. And we had the capability, of course, to do that here in the United States, as did other countries. We just let it slide. And we took this attitude, well, it's over there, it's not over here. My nose is itching. I'm outside on the porch and it's itching. One of the things that Hitler wanted to do is take back Sudetenland. And Sudetenland supposedly belonged to Germany. It was German-speaking people. He wanted to reunite it. And here's the funny thing. British leaders and French leaders, as your book said, got together and they were like, yeah, y'all can have it. Y'all can have it. Didn't discuss it with them or anything. And it's funny the way the world works that way. And you read about different things that Hitler did along the way. You also read about Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain was a nice term I could use. Well, anyway, Neville Chamberlain was not a good guy. And he was very weak. Your book uses the word appeasement. And, Neville Chamberlain thought that he had worked out a peace deal with Germany. He goes back home to Great Britain and says, we've achieved peace, and wasn't any such thing. So fascinating character in history, and of course, then Winston Churchill is going to come along, and he shows Neville Chamberlain what a real man is like. But that's neither here nor there. And your book talks about alliances. I want you to understand that. And then the invasion of Poland. That was huge. September 1st, 1939. Because of that invasion of Poland, Britain and France coming into the war, they had kind of stayed out of it, stayed out of the fray. But they came into the war because of Germany invading Poland. So that was a big thing that happened there. And then we know that France is going to fall real easily in World War II. Britain is going to remain strong. You're going to read about all that. I believe it's the next section that talks about that on the different fronts. Americans, we saw all of this. We're like, hey, we're over here. Y'all have a good time. Figure it out. We have an ocean between us in Europe. So our thought was, well, they're not going to get us. Who cares? And true, Germany, Italy, were not going to get us. Japan, separated by another ocean, was. So we just remained isolated, American isolation. One thing that I wanted to mention is Germany and Italy, and this one has always blown my mind because you can equate the two. You can equate Nazism, fascism, Marxism, communism. All of those are basically the same. They're just ran a little different. One's a dictatorship, one you might have a Politburo over or something like that, but they're all totalitarianism governments. But Italy and Germany did not like communism. They liked what they had, the fascism, the Nazism. And so they had signed an agreement with other European nations to fight communism. They would fight the spread of communism. So a lot of European nations looked at that as, well, at least they don't like communists, so they must not be all bad. But what Europe didn't understand is that behind the scenes, Germany was working out an agreement that, hey, if you don't get into the war, we won't attack you. We will make a deal with you not to attack the Soviet Union or Communist Russia. We won't do it. And we know that Russia finally gets pulled into it, and that makes a big difference as well. And your book talks about Pearl Harbor. You know a lot about Pearl Harbor. You've seen the movies. You've watched the documentaries. You've read the books. A very famous thing in America. I just want you to understand the weight of that and why Americans. I have had the opportunity to know several World War II veterans over the years, serving in churches. And there was one church I was at in East Gadsden that there were, I believe, 4 World War II veterans in that church. This has been several years ago. I believe all of them have passed away now. Also knew a guy, he's still alive, that he joined when he was 18, and he joined the day after Pearl Harbor, on that Monday. And he told me, and I had an opportunity to interview him on the radio. Very fascinating guy. He's still an attorney. He still practices law, and he's like 90, I believe, or maybe older than that now, 66, yeah. Anyway, fascinating character. But he joined because of what Japan did to the United States. Imagine you're sitting there on a Sunday morning. It's early. You're getting up. You're getting ready. Maybe you're reading a devotion. Maybe you're reading a magazine. Maybe you're writing a letter home. Maybe you're chit-chatting. Maybe you're getting ready for service. Whatever the case is. And you're not expecting an attack, and all of a sudden, boom, all of these planes start flying over. They've sawed off these things on the torpedoes where they can run shallow. And ships start exploding. Over 2,000 people are lost. And you imagine how angry you are at the Japanese. And that's the way the Americans were. Hey, if you attack one of us, I'm not big on California, but if somebody attacks California, or New York or whatever. Same feeling after 9/11. Hey, there were a lot of people that after 9/11 they signed up for the military because, hey, we're going to get whoever did this. Because we're all, even though I don't agree with California politics and a lot of states' politics, we're all Americans. And it was that attitude that catapulted us into World War II. And it made all the difference to us. And we finally get pulled in. Here's what I want you to do for tomorrow is I want you to read the course of the war. It's section 2. It starts on page 335 and it continues 336, 337, 338, 339, and 340. But there are a lot of pictures. I want you to look at the pictures too. Because this next section is going to wrap up World War II. They're covering it in one section. But look at the pictures because they're fascinating and it gives us a glimpse into what happened in World War II. It gives us a glimpse when we talk about bombs and when we talk about Hirohito and things of that nature. When you can see them in a picture, it makes all the difference. And tomorrow, or for today, I just want you to read this and mark done when you're done, but make sure you're done when you're done. Tomorrow we will discuss this and we'll continue as we talk about, tomorrow we'll talk about the actual war. And then we'll talk about the consequences of the war the next day. We had a meeting with Mr. Altman this morning. We will not have any work on Friday. So just a couple of more days this week and we'll have a break. Listen, miss y'all. Hope you're doing well. Fascinating stuff in this chapter. I always love talking about the wars because they're so interesting and they're so ingrained in our society. And they explain a lot about American culture, about world culture, what it takes to move people into war. And we'll talk about the Holocaust a little bit, all kinds of interesting stuff that we'll get into. Hope you have a great day. Enjoy it. It's beautiful outside. I'm looking at trees and there's a bumblebee. I'm on the screen porch, but I have the screen door open and I'm hoping that bee didn't come in and sting me. So let's hope not. Miss y'all. Love y'all. Bye.